What's going on, Facebook? Thank you for tuning in to the Tim Macy Show. Today is a fun one. I have Christoper Waters here with us. Chris Waters of Waters International Realty. You reached out to me, wanted to be on the show, and then I was like, man, who's this Chris Waters guy? And all of a sudden, all I see are Waters International Realty signs popping up all over San Antonio. So fast growth. You've done a ton of stuff. #1 rated team for the Austin Business Journal in Austin. So welcome to the show. For the people who don't know who you are, give me your elevator pitch of who is Chris Waters.
Yeah, started as a real estate agent in 2006, 2007, right out of college. Joined as a buyer's agent onto a team, and was on that team for about 4 months before I quit, and pretty much I almost entirely got out of the business. And 3 years went by, and in that 3 years, I was still obsessed with real estate and marketing. I was studying SEO, writing blog articles, and all this stuff. And but I had a full-time job, and had a business I invested in 2009. Went totally bust. I lost everything, and I said, you know what? I'm gonna. For the last 3 years, I've been totally super passionate about learning real estate. I'm gonna dive headfirst in. And so I was unbelievably broke, sleeping on my girlfriend's couch at the time.
Nice.
And, I just started becoming a cold calling machine at the beginning of 2010. And, I last year published a book. I think most people know about the book.
Yeah.
And basically, in 3 short years, got it to net $1 million after expenses. And, our team in Austin does about 500 did little over 500 transactions last year. We started doing expansion. We're in San Antonio. Our San Antonio team will do about 250 transactions. We're in Killeen, Amarillo, got one open up in Dallas. I mean, as a group, we should get somewhere between 1,500 and 1,600 transactions this year. So yeah, I'm implementing the team model to its fullest, and my goal is to help other people scale the team model and do the right things in the right order to grow super fast.
So you start out and you're a rock star agent, right? And then you do a team, and now you're at this point where you're doing this expansion deal where you're starting teams in other areas. What do you think are the most important aspects of going from the agent to the team, and then kind of from the team to the expansion and having multiple teams? Like, what are the 2 or 3 attributes that you think are the most important?
So step 1 from agent to team, you need to be a good salesperson. And so I actually was not a rock star salesperson. For 6 months, I called expireds and withdrawals, and I was on a speed dialer, Mojo, prospecting, making hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of dials every single day, 7 days a week. And I was lucky to set 1 appointment a week and to take 1 listing per month, and I was doing it nonstop. So I think step 1 is really hone in your sales skills. I actually ended up hiring a sales coach to help me get really good on the phone, like setting appointments, and then the next thing I sucked at was like getting the listing agreement signed. So I think number 1, you got to become a great agent, which means you're really good at the sales process. And then the attribute to become a team leader, you need to provide enough opportunities to help other people be successful. So if you can train them to make them great agents, then the other missing piece is the opportunity side of the equation. And so that's where the marketing arm comes in. And you've got to start learning how to generate like massive sums of high quality leads to share with your team, and then obviously help train them on best practices on how to convert those leads.
So lead generation, I mean, you said you were calling a bunch, but you weren't setting appointments. What was the thing that changed that, right? Like what pivoted to start scheduling and to start getting listing appointments or start getting listings?
Yeah, I mean, when I was calling people, I would just, I had marbles in my mouth. I was getting tongue tied. Like, I didn't know what to say. They'd give me an objection, and I was kind of guessing. I didn't have a lot of certainty around how to overcome an objection. So there's lots of great coaches out there for expireds, but ultimately you need a script, and you need to know how to overcome the objections to go for the close and set the appointment.
So how do you get good at scripts though? Because some people are good at talking. I Like I have a couple scripts that I like, but I'm not really a script guy. I mean, what would you say about scripts and why are they so important?
It's just a foundation. Like I don't, actually, as you develop as a salesperson, you shouldn't need a script. You should be able to improvise more. But in the beginning, when you're trying to learn how to be a good salesperson, you need some kind of base foundation of a script that you know works. And you hear the same 5 or 6 objections over and over and over. So if you can get really good at overcoming those objections, you don't get tongue-tied, and then you can go for the close. So it's just a foundation. It's not like you're going to be using these scripts for the next like 5 to 10 years. At a certain point, you'll be able to improvise on the scripts, and it's just about, ultimately identifying if there's a legit motivation behind the homeowner you're talking to.
Now, you've been doing it for a little while. Do you have one line that you like that's like your favorite line to drop on somebody to handle a certain objection?
My favorite close is what works better, mornings or afternoons.
Okay. Yeah.
I hate asking open-ended questions like, what would work good for you, Mr. Seller?
Mm-hmm.
No, I like going in for the kill and saying what works better, mornings or afternoons on Friday, for example, and just go for the kill, set the appointment. So
I like it. So scripts.
Yeah.
You also said though that once you set the appointments, you'd have trouble getting the listing agreement, right? And
yep.
You go down the line. It's like, all right, I need to make more phone calls. And once you make more phone calls, you realize you have to actually set more appointments. So you work on your scripts. Now that you set appointments, the appointment is a whole other ball game, right? That you have to be good at. So
yep.
What are your keys to success for closing at the appointments that you set?
So I created a listing presentation and like a listing training module for my expansion partners. And it takes hours and hours to like really dial it in, but a 10,000-foot view of it's kind of like playing baseball. Like first base on the listing appointment is about building an immense amount of rapport to the point like where you've pretty much made a new best friend. And if you're not a high I personality and you don't know how to build rapport, there's a great acronym called FORD, F-O-R-D. Talk about family, occupation, recreation, dreams, desires, and then just trying to find commonalities with them as you walk through their home. So first base is about establishing a really great rapport with the sellers. And then second base is about establishing yourself as an expert. So they know that what you're talking about, they can feel totally confident in. So that means not only showing them actives, pending, sold, it also means showing them like market data, like for example, talking about macroeconomics or how the interest rates might affect home values. And one thing we like to do is we have this formula to calculate the absorption rate in the neighborhood, and then we can to the penny we know exactly where they need to price their home based off if the market's appreciating or depreciating. And then if it's like a really bad market for sellers, and there's like 12 months of inventory, we have a pricing structure we educate them on that'll guarantee that their home sells. And then the third base is about differentiation, like what can you do differently than all the other agents out there to market their property for sale. And then home plate, that's the close. And the secret of the close is just you should be very assumptive. Like if they're not signing with you, it's because you screwed up one of those bases. Either you didn't build rapport, they don't feel confident in your number. Like second base, for example, is all about pricing. And one of my secrets to pricing is I never, ever give the price to a seller. I always make the seller tell me what they think the house is worth. And the way I position it is I tell them, look, my job is to educate you on the market, to tell you everything about what's going on in the market. And I want you to put yourself in the shoes of a buyer. And when I'm done, I'd like you to tell me what you think your home is worth based off all this information. And they're going to say, no, I don't want to tell you. I don't want to, that's your job. Tell them, look, I'll write the number on the back of a piece of paper. And then at the end of this, after I share all this with you, then tell me what you think. And there's, you can't go wrong either way. I just want to know where you're coming from, Mr. Seller, after I've kind of educated you on the market. So that's one of the secrets in base 2 is making them give you the price.
And sorry, I had to mute my microphone there. What was third base coming down?
Differentiation. So you got to differentiate yourself. What can you do to outshine the competition?
So I I like that. I like trying to differentiate myself. What do you think good listing agents in this market are doing right now to differentiate yourself? Because there's so many, the top 10%, let's say, of real estate agents, professional pictures and sticking online, right? Like, and pray that it sells. The bottom, obviously, are cell phone pictures and sticking online. So what do you guys do to differentiate yourself as far as listing agents?
Yeah, great question. So like some of the things we have in place is our what we call our mega agent bonus program. We advertise our listings with a $10,000 bonus. Doesn't cost the seller $10,000. Every time we sell 100 houses that are enrolled in our mega agent bonus program, we give away the $10,000. We also, if it's a vacant house, we'll use boxbrownie.com to get the house staged if it's vacant.
Yep.
And then we have a staging consultant go in and do a staging of the house. We also use something called Seller Shield, and Seller Shield is a insurance policy for sellers so that if they ever get sued, they've got this $25,000 kind of policy to protect them, and that money can be applied towards legal fees if for some reason they got into any kind of like legal proceeding between them and the buyer after the sale of the house. So, I mean, these are just a couple of the bullet points, but it's all these value add items beyond just the internet, Facebooks, all that for sale signs, open house. It's a lot of value add stuff.
Natalie asked, always wondered how you got going. Interesting. She's asking about your guarantee program for sellers and how does that work?
So it's really simple. So what I did was I went out to a couple different state chartered banks, and I got what's called an asset guidance line of credit. And so an asset guidance line of credit is like buying for cash. You can close in a matter of days. And the bank just puts a deed of trust on the property, and it's just like a cash transaction. So that's what basically underwrites my guaranteed sale program. And essentially what we tell the seller is we will pay 90% of a third-party appraisal less any standard closing costs and commissions you would pay as a seller, and that's what our purchase price would be. The only exception to the rule when we don't buy a house is if it's had flooding, foundations jacked up, it needs some kind of structural repairs, and then the other exception is if it's located in an area where there's more than 6 months of inventory, they're not going to qualify.
Okay.
They could qualify for our immediate buyout option where we just buy it for cash. But ultimately, if it's more than 6 months, the reason we put the exception in there for areas where you've got more than 6 months of inventory is because the price we'd have to buy it at is stupid, and we'd look like we're trying to buy houses for cheap. So, that's not
the best. It's always in the best interest of the seller to sell it on the open market for the most amount they can.
Right. Exactly. So
obviously, sometimes there's situations where they do need to sell it fast, and you guys being able to close that quick for them is probably a help in certain cases.
Yep. So, I mean, it's, I gave the whole kind of model to the bank, and that's how we've got a, pretty large line of credit. Started off small in the beginning as we built the team. But, as things grew, I got a bigger and bigger line of credit. So now I've got a couple $1 million at my disposal, and we probably buy, 2-3 homes a month in Austin. So anyways, it's, it's for certain sellers, it's a good program.
Tell me about, so a lot of this stuff is always around lead generation, right? Every, seminar I go to, they're talking about how to get more leads, and there's always people trying to sell you on how to get more leads, right? And you're talking about how do we close them? How do we get that listing agreement signed? I like to dive into, like, how do you take care of your clients that sets you apart, right? Because ultimately the customer service is what drives the business, and what should drive the business is how we take care of our clients. So what do you guys do at your place that is driving your client satisfaction?
Yep. So great question. So something I think we do that's really unique is it starts with our position agreements with our team members. So typically there's an agent and like a coordinator working with the client. And if we don't get a review from a customer online, or if we get a negative review, then the coordinator takes a hit on their bonus, and so does the agent. So they actually get their commission split actually goes down if they get a negative review or there's no review put up. On the flip side, if they get a 5-star review, we actually pay them more. So that incentivizes them. So that's like from like the very beginning, like just foundational piece. But the ongoing stuff, like on the listing side, we've got a very structured communication plan. So every single Wednesday, we set the expectation on the beginning when we meet with the sellers. Every Wednesday, we're going to follow up with you and let you know of everything that's going on with your home. We've also got, just due to the, we've got about 150 listings in Austin alone. So my average listing agent in Austin is selling, between 100 and 120 homes. So they're cranking out sales.
Yeah.
So they don't have time to like call the agent after every single showing. So we have a full-time person that gets a notification every time one of our lockbox gets showed, and they will call the agent, try to get feedback over the phone, fill out the survey, make sure it gets filled out, send it to the seller. So that immediate feedback to the seller about showings is really important on the listing side. And then just setting really good expectations around what you're gonna do, and then showing them, like actually showing them the documentation. So like we send them every week, we send them the actual like copies of places we put their home for sale. Like when we go in and tweak the Zillow ad, we send them the Zillow link, we send them the Realtor.com link for the featured listing, we send them the website we build for them. We actually send them all the proof that we're actually following through on this marketing plan and we're doing what we say we're going to do. So that's ultimately what is going to lead to 5-star reviews is setting great expectations and following through.
Yeah, I think you nailed it from my experience. The things that went wrong were either two things. I didn't set expectations and I didn't communicate, right? Those are usually where deals go bad. So if you set expectations good up front, which a lot of agents that are trying to get started don't take into account, right? Because they're just trying to oversell themselves so they can get a listing. But setting expectations of how the process is going to go is going to help you out a ton. And then communication. I talked to so many of these expired listings that say, yeah, we just, they stuck it on the market. We never heard from our agent. So communication is huge as well. Jay Marks coming in with a question. How is your team structured? Are you personally involved in purchasing homes or is that delegated?
In the beginning, I was. I was going out and looking at the homes and, talking with the listing agent that talked to the seller. A lot of the homes that go into the guaranteed sale program are people facing foreclosure, or they're in a situation where it was listed previously by another agent. They're paying 2 mortgages, and so they just want that certainty. So anyways, in the beginning, it was me. But now I've got a full-time director of operations who oversees my listing coordinators, my transaction coordinators, and he's also, working with the listing agents quite frequently. And he's been with me for 5 years. He knows how to research the comps and like validate everything. And he's kind of running the numbers behind the scenes. Excuse me. And then I have a full-time project manager that we brought on about 2 years ago. And he's the one that actually goes in and like looks at the house, comes up with the repairs. He's not contracted out. Like this is a full-time employee.
Yeah.
Highly paid employee, makes really good money. And his job is to basically babysit all the contractors that work on a house if we have to take it on. Like a lot, and again, some of the houses we buy typically need a lot of work. There's stuff wrong with them. So,
babysitting contractors is probably the best money you'll pay because the minute you stop babysitting them, the money starts disappearing. So I'm sure that guy is well worth whatever you're paying him.
Before I brought him on, I had all the horror stories of like paying people. They disappeared. I mean, I've screwed it up so many ways, and having somebody that is like on your team looking out for you, it's going to help you make sure you don't make those mistakes of hiring contractors that just, run off after, they're halfway through the job. Yeah,
for sure. All right. Adam Bailey is taking a little bit of a shot here. Everybody knows I'm at EXP. We've got a bunch of people that are at EXP that watch the show. And it brings up kind of my next point. He segued it a little differently than I was going to. But, in this kind of market where you have people that are building like mega teams at brokerages, right? I mean, we've had a lot of independent brokers move their small brokerages to EXP. You're saying I'm going to build a new franchise, right? Which is huge. I mean, and that's like a completely different direction. So what puts you in that direction? Where are you trying to go? What's your big vision, and how do you think you're going to get there?
Yeah, great question. So, I mean, first off, Adam, that guy, he's a prospecting inside sales. So yeah, I mean, I basically like studied the industry as a whole, And what I realized is like when you go and look at all these franchises, all of them, Century 21, Better Homes and Garden, KW, Remax, all of them, like the franchise systems out there are based off of agent count. Like it's about get as many agents as humanly possible, and then upsell those agents on coaching and classes and all that kind of stuff. And so there's nobody with a franchise brand that's got the systems, the processes, and a clear roadmap to quickly scale the team model. And so, what I looked at EXP, and I think, they basically one-upped KW. I think they improved on the economic model. They've got the ownership piece for people to have an exit. But I think the thing that really differentiates what I'm doing in EXP is like I'm giving people a business in a box and a roadmap and like the tools and all of the assets to actually scale the team model really quickly. So back in 2015, I started a team with somebody in Amarillo. She was a single agent. She had been in the business 10 years and she hit a ceiling. She went from 25 closings to 90, just under 90. I think it was like 89, 87, something like that in her first year with me. Second year, she did 150. This year, she's on track to do 250. I opened up an office in San Antonio with the guy. I gave him all these processes, systems, the roadmap. Chad was from Kansas. He got a PhD and he was genetically modifying soybeans. He had no sales experience. Wasn't from the state of Texas. They fell in love with the hill country. He opened up a team in San Antonio. This year in San Antonio, he's going to do somewhere between 250 and 275 transactions. And he's been doing it for less than 2 years. So I use these guys as guinea pigs, and it really took off. So after we kind of had these guinea pigs, if you will, and really refine the model, I feel like we cracked the code with scaling the team model really quickly. And it's about who to hire and when to hire them. And then it's about what lead generation systems to pull the trigger on and when to pull the trigger. So, it's like expireds and withdrawals, for example, those are great in the beginning. And then kind of like, as you scale, there's other lead generation pillars you need to add. I always use this example of like buying something from IKEA. If you buy a piece of furniture from IKEA, and I don't know about you, Tim, but like I can't tell you how many times I bought a piece of furniture from IKEA. I don't buy furniture there from anymore, but when I did, back when I was broke in college, I would assemble the thing, and I'd be left with all these screws at the end of it, and then I had to take the whole thing apart, and I was like, God dang it, I'm like, fuck, I'm like having to start all over. So it's like you got to do the right things in the right order. You can go 2 steps forward and 3 steps back very easily. If you implement the wrong lead generation activity, if you hire the wrong person, it's very easy to screw up that growth trajectory when you're trying to scale super fast. So my goal is to help people build teams and scale to doing 500 plus homes in 3 to 4 years, which is crazy, crazy fast. And so far, I've got 4 people so far that are my early success stories on that track. And that's exactly what people are buying into for our franchise system is the clear roadmap on how to do that.
So are you, and I just like to, I don't like to knock around anything. I like to dive right into the details. So you're selling a franchise, or is it like a partnership agreement? What's that look like? And the other thing that you said, which I love, is that, this old model of have a franchise, bring on as many people, and then get revenue from them through all these other things. I think it's true. So are you saying that you're going to have a franchise where you don't do that? Like you're going to have somebody in San Antonio and you're only going to have 10 agents in San Antonio and that's it? Or are you going to have 200 agents in San Antonio?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think anybody listening to this knows, like, you go look at Keller Williams and they have lots of teams, right, in one city. So depending on the size of the city, sure, we could have more than one franchisee, but the franchisee is also the team leader and the broker and operator. And my goal is to help them plan their great escape. So I want them to build the business really quickly and then get into a position where they're the business owner and they have a sellable asset. That's my ultimate goal, is for them to build a huge business and have a sellable asset. And it's up to them if they want to keep working in the business or they want to get out. I personally haven't worked with a client for 5 years. It took me 3.5 years to get out of production.
Yeah.
And so my goal is to help a lot of other people do that. And I have invested personally over $5 million just in lead generation, and I have tried everything. And so there's a formula to every single lead generation strategy. And you've got to get that formula just right to be able to get a good ROI. So we're sharing a lot of our ahas, if you will, over the years of building the team model. Same with on the people side. It's building a team. It's all about the who. So your position agreements, how you structure compensation, how you train people. We have developed an online university, just like University of Phoenix.
Yeah.
And at the top of it, you've got training modules for each position within the team model. So, and then we have tests that back up those training modules. So when you hire a buyer agent, they go through all these training modules, and then they have to test out. And then as the franchisor, we offer owner coaching calls every Thursday where we're talking about how to get the business to grow faster. And other people get to share, what's working, what's not in their market. And that's ultimately what we're trying to position to help people do is scale the team model and do it super fast. And as far as I know, we are the only franchise system that is selling a system that's like giving you the tools and the systems and the knowledge to do that very quickly.
Yeah, it's an interesting landscape right now. There's a bunch of new things popping up, right? You got Compass, you got, what is it, Next Home. There's a bunch of these little companies that are popping up. It seems like they'll have a different little offering.
Yep.
The thing that I see happening is that, the like Keller Williams, right? Culture, training. The core values that I agree with, right? And I think they're obviously biggest real estate company in the world, and they have so many positives about them. And I don't think necessarily it's anything about that that will hurt them in the next coming years. But I think it's just the typical structure of the franchise model where agents are just looking for a platform to build their business on, right? Like, you're giving agents a platform for them to build their business on top of, and they go off, take off. It's like being able to sell your stuff on Amazon instead of having to get do a deal with Target, right? Like, agents and brokers just need a platform to build their business on top of. And that's where I find it interesting to see what's going to happen with brokerages over the next couple of years. But your growth has been, what have you been doing? 2 years, 3 years? What's it been?
Yeah, so we got registered with the Federal Trade Commission and got approval last fall.
Yeah,
so,
crazy.
We're very new to the game. We brought on our first official franchisee in Killeen, Texas, which is a couple hours north of Austin, and we've got 12 more locations opening in Texas this year. And I'm taking basically people, like, the perfect candidate for me is that agent that is like crushing it and they hit a ceiling and they're doing 40, 50, 60, 70
Yep.
deals. And they want to and they enjoy being a part of the consumer experience and the process. And they don't want to go in the business of being like full-time recruiter and having hundreds of agents. Like, that's the perfect candidate to join our system, because we're going to help them go from, for example, 75 deals to 500 deals, and they can still be very involved in the business. And then if they choose so, they can also exit and put leadership in place to run the business and then they just, hop in and, whenever they want at their leisure.
So you talk about lead generation strategies, what you have figured out. The thing that's fun about those is they're always changing, right? Like, what worked 6 months ago isn't working today, and what works today may not work 6 months from now. So it's 2018. Let's date this, right? It's April 2018. What's your favorite strategy for lead gen that you're just implementing now? Favorite tactic? Give me a nugget.
This is something we implemented just recently, but about a year ago, we started running newspaper ads, and that sounds so old school. But we hire a journalist to write an article, and it looks like an actual article in the newspaper. It doesn't look like a billboard.
And there's like one little thing up in the corner that says this is an advertisement or something?
It says this is an advertorial.
Advertorial. Okay. All right. I like it.
So like it's all about storytelling, and it looks very native to the newspaper. And so the newspaper, typically your reader for the newspaper is going to skew older, like 45 to 75 years of age. And those are the perfect homeowners to be working with because they have lots of equity. They typically have more expensive homes because they're in better locations. For example, there's some like more regional newspapers where they're in surrounding suburbs. But like, for example, the Austin American Statesman, like the core of Austin is expensive. Like you can't buy a house in the core of Austin for less than 500,000 to 600,000. So it's, they've got 120,000 people that get a newspaper, and they're the perfect demo of seller to be targeting. So we can get and then it's amazing. You can negotiate an amazing deal with the newspaper. So we get these full page ads, and we put this full thing of content, and we kind of do a lot of storytelling. Like we may talk about a listing that failed to sell, and the customer is trying to move away, and we came in and kind of saved the day. Like those kind of stories are kind of the stuff we publish in the newspaper.
Not the answer I was expecting at all. But you're saying that, go ahead.
Everybody knows all the other stuff, right? I mean, like the digital stuff, like everybody knows, like Facebook and SEO, pay-per-click. Like, I mean,
So
I like to go where nobody else is going.
I like it.
Because you negotiate the best deals, and sometimes that's where you can target the best consumer. So.
For sure. So as long like I would say you're crazy, but obviously for negotiating a great deal on newspaper, then yeah, it's where it's wherever the value is, right? Wherever the best value is to get those solid leads. So man, newspaper. Geez, you like stopped me in my tracks. I can't think of anything else now. So
I think people doing Facebook ads, they don't have enough people to work all the leads. So like you can go generate crap tons of leads on Facebook, and to get reasonable conversion rates, you've got to be speed to lead, multiple contacts, and you're not going to succeed unless you're not going to succeed at a high level if you don't have an inside sales team in place. And my definition of succeeding at a high level is a listing agent or buyer's agent that's selling, on the listing side, 75 houses. We have a new franchisee coming on in Dallas. With one assistant, she sold 117 homes last year. No Facebook ads, no digital, a lot of old school stuff.
Yeah.
So it's about you got to be efficient as a salesperson. If you're a single agent operator doing Facebook, you've got a shit ton of leads you got to work through to close one deal.
So let's go back to newspaper because you've intrigued me. What's the best newspaper advertisement story thing that you did that's generated the most interest?
Man, to be honest, I mean, all of them are going to guarantee us get at least one or two listings out of them. So we post it every week. You get 1 or 2 listings every single week.
So no post in particular that you wrote up, some article type thing that got you more than others?
It's all storytelling,
Yeah.
Every week it's a different story about a homeowner relocating, or somebody that had a bad experience, or somebody that was a for sale by owner that we listed their house, and they ended up selling for more than they had it listed for as a for sale by owner. So it's storytelling. Every week it's different, and it's just you present what a consumer might think as a potential solution, which could be FSBO, for example, and then they share their story, and then they talk about how you came in and essentially saved the day and exceeded the expectations, and so it's all storytelling.
What you talked about taking agents from 40, 50 deals a year and then launching them into more mega agent status. What's the biggest hurdle that you see with these agents that you're building up that's holding them back from taking that next leap in production? What's the one thing, if you could put your finger on it, that most of these agents have trouble with?
Control. They want to control everything, and they're afraid to give things up. And you've got to, to be able to grow really fast, you've got to get really good at replacing yourself really fast. So that comes down to it starts with a courier to deliver stuff, your guide to earnest money, option money, signs.
not your job.
Stage, like send out a stager, pay a stager to go out there and do it. Like hire a virtual assistant to put stuff in the MLS, to tweak all your profiles. You can go hire a virtual assistant through myoutdesk.com for like $1,200 a month, and you have a full-time employee, or hire somebody local that's part-time and pay them $15 an hour to start helping you, and start delegating tasks so that you can focus on what drives top-line revenue.
Top-line revenue. Explain.
Sales. Yeah, so I mean, like, gross sales, right? So like if you start delegating tasks, you're, in terms of like net income, maybe if it's just you and you don't have to pay like all these vendors, right? Maybe you keep like 90% of the gross revenue. Well, when you start outsourcing stuff, your net income is going to go down. You're only going to get to keep like 70 to 80. Mm-hmm. But instead of generating 100,000 in gross revenue, or GCI, whatever, now you're going to be able to do 200,000 because you just were able to take 20 hours of a week, delegate it to somebody else, and then you were able to focus that into converting leads, getting new clients, getting buyer reps, listing agreements, and getting deals closed to drive top-line revenue. Gross sales.
I like it. So I'm an agent. I'm doing 40 deals a year, 50 deals a year. What's my first thing I should get rid of, and what's the first person I should hire?
Yeah, so like I said, either a virtual assistant or like a part-time assistant in your, like that comes and sits with you and works in your office or at your house. That's like your first key hire in terms of like employees or whatever. But in terms of like outsourcing stuff, like the basics, photographer, courier, staging, like everything that has to do with listings, outsource it. So if you're heavily listing focused, that's what you should do. You should delegate all that stuff. If you're heavily buyer focused, you got to hire a showing assistant, and you got to delegate all your showing work to a showing assistant.
So next question, office space. Obviously I'm pretty anti-giant brick and mortar, beautiful office space downtown on the corner, looks nice with the cute secretary at the front, right? I think it's a little overkill on what you need. What do you use office space for? Do you think you need an office? Does every person need an office? What's your take?
So I started with a Regus space. It was a virtual office. So like I just used the conference room and I worked out of my house. And that's what I did until I had enough revenue to be able to afford an office. And then what I did was actually like sublet like one office in a big building for like a couple $100 a month. Mm-hmm. And we kept moving like every 6 to 12 months into bigger and bigger spaces. But honestly, if you're growing the team model, you really need a place to work because there's a lot of collaboration. You get to build a really cool culture, and a lot of people get to kind of motivate one another. Like, as an agent, your job is to get in front of as many people as possible. To get in front of as many people as possible, you got to spend a lot of time on the phone, like prospecting leads, following up with people, and setting appointments. So if you can create like a mosh pit of people that are, in there ringing a bell, trying to set appointments, and meet buyers and sellers, like that's a cool, conducive environment that helps improve your mindset. Because like if you're out working by yourself, sometimes like when you get told no 50 times and you don't have anybody around you helping lift you up, it gets tough. So that team camaraderie of being in an office can be very, very helpful if you have the right culture.
I'd like to dive into, I know Jay touched on it here, team structure. Buyer's agents, listing agents, all that stuff can get a little bit complicated. What's your team structure like, and what do you think about how teams should be structured?
So in terms of team structuring, I think about it more on the agency side around the agent's career trajectory and like from a learning perspective. And so I think it's, in a perfect world, you start out doing inside sales, like mastering the phones, and then move into like a showing assistant role where you're out looking at a ton of houses and you get to know all the areas in the neighborhoods. And then you move into a buyer's agent role where you're still prospecting, you're setting appointments, you're showing property, you're kind of doing it all, but you're also trying to get people committed to hiring you because you're giving them a buyer presentation and you're trying to get a representation agreement signed. So once you've kind of crushed as a buyer's agent, then move on to a listing agent role and then into a leadership role. So that's kind of the trajectory path for agents. And so our team is structured where we've got buyer specialists, we have listing specialists, we have a transaction coordinator who helps the buy team. We have two coordinators on the listing side. We have a courier, a photographer, a stager. We have a full-time marketing coordinator that helps with all of our listings. We also have a director of lead generation, and so from a leadership perspective, if we think top down, we've got a director of lead gen who oversees the inside sales team and is collaborating with our marketing coordinator, running all of our campaigns to get more leads in. So that's the director of lead gen and that pillar. And then the next pillar is our director of sales, who oversees the buyer agents and the listing agents. And then our director of operations oversees the coordinators, listing manager, courier, showing assistant, like all the kind of W-2 staff. That's like his pillar.
So that's a lot of staff. That's a lot of stuff. It's a lot of people to get paid. So, I mean, how do you split up a commission when you have that type of structure in place?
So basically on the listing side, the commission splits are, on average between 15 and 20%, depending on what listing commission menu item the consumer picks. So we have a menu of commission options that starts at 6% and goes up from there. And so their split adjusts between 10 and 20%. They average about 15% of the gross revenue per deal. And then, like I said, they're selling on average over 100 homes. And all they have to do is go on appointments. So the appointments get set for them on the listing side. They don't have to deliver signs. They have someone doing the MLS. Like, they literally show up, educate the consumer, get the listing agreement signed, turn it in, make the weekly success calls, follow up with them, negotiate the contract, and they're turning and burning. They're selling machines.
So they're just focusing on what they're good at, is what you're telling me.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah, that's big for me. I think that's a big thing that I don't think a lot of agents figure out, is figuring out how to focus on your strengths and then outsource your weaknesses. And it sounds like your people are pretty focused on what they do. Colin does a lot on social media. He asks, how do you approach your social media for lead gen?
So, yeah, great question. Depending on where your business is, I actually am very anti social media if you're doing 0 to 50 deals. I think the idea of creating a brand and building brand awareness when you're doing less than 50 deals is a waste of time. Once you're doing like once you're able to really allocate some serious money to social media, and let me bring out one of my favorite books here, right here. I love this book, Crushing It by Gary Vee. The reason I say it's a waste of time to be doing social media when your deals 0 through 50 is because it takes a lot of time. Like, if you read Gary's book, right? A dude owns VaynerMedia. This is what he does. And what he talks about is like how much work it takes to be building a following on social media. It's a shit ton of work, like tons and tons of work. And I already went down that path. Like, I personally went down that path of trying to build, where basically I was trading my time for leads. And I was doing, this was back in the day, I was trying to do SEO and be like an SEO expert when like that's all people talked about. I was writing blog articles, doing backlinks, and I had somebody tell something to me because like this guy was crushing it. I think I sold like 36 homes that year, and this guy was selling a couple hundred. And I said, I was like, man, I can't get my PR score of my website to be higher than this other competitor. What do I do? And so like in 2010, right, like SEO is huge, just like social media right now is huge. And he said, dude, the only guys that give a shit about PR score and SEO are the ones that aren't making any money. And so I would tell Colin, I have no idea where you are in your business, but I would tell you, if you're focused on trying to build a following in social media, you're going to turn and burn your wheels and waste a shit ton of time, because the amount of time you invest in trying to build a following in social media, you could be going after lower hanging fruit and you'll get more deals and they'll close faster. It takes a long time to build a following unless you have a bunch of money behind you to artificially inflate how fast that following grows.
Well, Colin's probably a bad example because he builds a social media following for cheap because he's entertaining, right? Like he's entertaining and he's engaging. So that does well in certain instances. But I see your point on how much time you do spend. I mean, I spend a lot of time building brand awareness on social. But what would you divert that to, right? Like if you're saying that isn't the best piece of if that isn't the best way to use your time, what would you divert somebody to doing instead of doing that?
So, I mean, the first thing you need to be focusing on is building your listing inventory, going after expireds, withdrawals, and FSBOs. And that's where you're gonna grind your teeth and hone your sales skills, so that once you actually get leads, which come very few and far between, when you're doing like trying to build a following on social, you actually know how to convert them. Because if you know how to convert FSBOs and expireds, your sales skills are going to be like, I mean, on point.
Don't spend time on social. It's pretty against everything that I do. So it's good though, because most of the people that we have on are big on like how can you generate leads online, building social media. So I love having a different approach, and so that's why I'm glad to have you on here, because you have a much different view and outlook and approach on things. So awesome stuff.
So like my one thing, right, is like I'm selling a franchise system to help people scale really effing fast. Like we're talking about going from 50 to 150 in one single year. You are not going to get 100 transactions in 1 year from building a following, because I've already tried that shit. And I've invested hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars and hired people to try to do it. And it doesn't work. Like it's not going to happen. There's other low-hanging fruit to grow really fast. And then when you get your revenue to where you're making a couple $100,000 per month, then you can hire a team of like social media magicians that are pumping out content, that are getting likes, that are building a huge following so that you can stay in front of people. But there's a lot of steps you got to do before you get to that point. And that's exactly what he says in his book, is like you're going to have to dedicate a shit ton of time. Like he says in his book, you need to spend 1 to 2 years and be prepared not to make shit. But I can take somebody and help them go from 50 to 150 deals in 1 year, and they're not going to make shit. They're going to make a ton of money. They're going to add over $500,000 in gross revenue. So I think long-term, like the long-term viability of your business, absolutely, like fucking absolutely. You have to get your social media game on point, and you need to build a following. Like all this old school stuff, like radio, TV, billboard, direct mail, all that stuff. You're going to have to eventually like divert to social. But for the time being, we're kind of in this little sweet spot where you can utilize both old school advertising and new school. But there's a way to grow really fast, and starting in social, building a social following is really freaking slow. And I would rather wait to do social until I've got, $500,000 to go drop on it, and then go from 5,000 followers to 500,000. You know what I mean?
I like it. No. I mean, you can't argue with numbers, right? So it makes sense. I've had you here for our food buy. This is a good interview. You know, it's a good interview when I look up and we're at about 50 minutes already. So one thing you want to leave our people with to help them in their careers, in their lives, whatever it is, what would be the one message you want to get across to people listening to this podcast?
I think the easiest thing for people, the easiest trap for people to fall into is a lot of agents, they see a lot of stuff being pushed to them via sponsored ads. And there's a lot of great internet marketers out there. And, they try to position things that you're unfamiliar with as like this shiny object. And it's like, this is what you need to go focus on. And it can ultimately become a massive distraction to your business. So like, I can't even tell you how many people I have like putting sponsored ads on my Facebook feed saying, go learn how to be an amazing Facebook advertiser. like I've already invested a couple $100,000 in Facebook, and like I understand the numbers very, very well. And Facebook's amazing. The economic model is amazing. You can generate like your client acquisition cost can be really low, really high ROI. The challenge is like, again, if you're a single agent, like you don't have an inside sales team and there's only so many hours in a day. And so you need to go after the low hanging fruit. It's all about high quality of leads and the conversion cycle. Like Facebook leads on average are going to convert at like 3 to 12 months. And that's to get like 1 to 2% conversion. So how on earth is one person going to handle, like say for example, you want to sell, 20 houses. So if it takes 100 leads to close one, that means you've got to generate 2,000 leads. Well, it's pretty damn hard for one person to manage 2,000 leads. Plus, you're trying to go out there and show property, maybe get listings, put in the MLS, all this other stuff. So if you can go work 100 leads and convert 100 of those into 10 listings, that sounds a hell of a lot more advantageous and better in my mind from an efficiency perspective. So I think the thing I leave with people is just because there's some new shiny object out there, doesn't necessarily mean you need to go get distracted with that. I'd try to stay laser focused on stuff that works, that has proven to work in the past, and don't reinvent the wheel. Like follow in other people's footsteps. There's this saying, pioneers get slaughtered and settlers prosper. So go find shit that works, that's already proven, and then you can pioneer once you're out there crushing it and you're number one in your market and you've got this disposable income to throw money around and, test new things out.
I love it. I love it. Pioneers get slaughtered, settlers prosper. Awesome stuff. Well, Chris, thanks for coming on. I appreciate it. People, I assume, find you on Facebook, probably the easiest place.
Yeah, Facebook. If anybody's interested, our book is on Amazon.
Yes.
This is literally like a I documented my journey of scaling the team model. You can buy it on Amazon, or you can go to wirbook.com and get a copy of it. And I think the best thing about the book was I was very open, and I like very openly told people like what I screwed up, like a lot of different things I screwed up. So it's not all like all these amazing things like we did great. There's a lot of we talk a lot about things we did wrong. So it'll show you both sides of the coin.
Awesome stuff. I look forward to it. I am going to order a copy of it on the old Amazon when we get off here. Next week, we've got Jackie Soto coming on, and that should be a fun one too. So thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Chris, thanks for coming on, and we'll see you next week.
Great. Thanks, Tim. Thanks for having me.